Quotation from myself, segment 46, quotation number 560. One is never completely free until one's parents are dead, but then, as much as has been gained in freedom has been lost to loneliness. 561. Do not reprove a man for being hopeless and pessimistic, for most probably his own life caused him to be so. Or how one who never have justice done to him can believe in justice, and one who has never received mercy can hope for mercy. 562. Contrary to the popular saying, the opposites are rarely attracted to each other for any significantly extended period of time, and even then, mainly out of curiosity, the fascination with the unknown. But the people we really like are those those we are comfortable with, who, after all has been said and done, are essentially the same as we are. 563. A place of exile and a place of refuge is the same place. 564. To do one's own thing, or to do the right thing, that is the modern question. 565. The greatest curse of humanity is the inability of an average ordinary man to think for himself, which makes one a gullible and credulous victim to any false prophet and deceitful demagogue which may come along. 566. When a woman says to a man, "I love you," what she really means is, "You belong to me." When a man says to a woman, "I love you," what he acknowledges is, "I belong to you." That is why the first is so eager in anticipation of gain, and the second so reluctant in apprehension of a loss to utter this pregnant with so much meaning of phrase. 567. People believe in conspiracy theories. Almost everybody has at least one, because it makes them feel important enough to be conspired against. Otherwise, they have to accept too brutal a truth, that in reality, most of the time, nobody gives a damn about them. 568. Nobody familiar with the past, in comparison to the present, can deny the wisdom of Ecclesiastes, who had declared almost 3,000 years ago that there is nothing new under the sun. It is especially true in the field of the so-called fine arts, where the forms sometimes give the appearance of progress and evolution, but the essence never changes. Hence the fear of repetition of what has been said and done by the previous generation, which could suffocate the creative impulse of the present one, and as a result lead to artistic impotence. Modernism, which was driven by such a fear of repetition, is the most striking testimony of this phenomenon. 569. It is not what one denounces and rejects, but it is not what one denounces and rejects, but what one proposes instead that counts. 570. While the present is trying to correct the mistakes of the past, it is preparing the ground for those of the future. 571. Repeatedly frustrated, yet seemingly undying wish of the public for politicians to reflect the views of those who elect them has as much chance of fulfillment as an attempt to make pigs fly. 572. Psychologically, some people live in the world of reality, others in the world of fantasy. And though these two worlds, almost by definition, are irreconcilably different, each has its apparent advantage, for otherwise nobody would dwell there, and obvious disadvantages, for no place is perfect, as we all know too well. How the member of these two psychologically distinct groups has reached their respective state of mind and settled in their opposite world of consciousness is hard to say, unless assuming that it all started in childhood, the life of each individual member could be traced from the earliest infancy till the mature adulthood. But despite the claims by Freudian psychoanalysts, this is next to impossible. Nevertheless, one thing is clear, that but whatever route they have arrived there, each group grows accustomed to its specific world and develops an overwhelming dependency on its specific psychological environment. Of course, every now and then, the realists indulge in fantasies, and the dreamers often have to face the reality check. But most of their lives are spent in diametrically opposite worlds. And needless to say, they do not mix well. Moreover, any attempt either to bridge the gap or to leave one world and move into another, whether it is done voluntarily or under the compulsion, is doomed to failure, which sometimes can reach the tragic proportion. 573. If the worldly wisdom is but an acquired immunity to the vagaries and vicissitudes of life, then no one is wise, since nobody is immune to his pain. 574. Despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary, the evidences which could be derived almost daily from both from public and private experiences, humanity stubbornly clings to the notion that the good life is the norm, and that the bad things, no matter how frequently and consistently they happen to us, are just temporary aberrations. And because of this perceived normalcy of the good, it is seldom, if ever, either questioned or analyzed. It seems that only pain and misfortune, by reason of being considered by the majority as abnormal or even unnatural, call for explanation, whereas the pleasure and good fortunes are either simply enjoyed without giving it a second thought, or recounted in a more or less detailed fashion, as if inviting a reader, a listener, or a viewer to partake, if only vicariously, in the joys of the narrators. That is why the historical periods of relative prosperity tend to be conducive to the descriptive or at least syncretic modes of public discourse, especially in the intellectual artistic field, while the bad times compel the explanatory and analytical approach. The second half of the 20th century, up to the late 80s, was a time of such prosperity, and as a result, the descriptive was a predominant style of expression and thought. And this time were especially good for those who are mainly responsible for the artistic and intellectual production. The almost inexhaustible shower of endowment, grant, chairs, tenures, etc., pouring out as a veritable cornucopia of public largesse, creating in the recipient the state of being, and consequently the state of mind of satisfaction and complacency. After all, when things are good, why question the causes? Let the good times flow. Unfortunately for our lives, but hopefully beneficial for our intellectual creativity, the good times never last forever. In the early 90s, things had started to go bad, not only for the ordinary folks, but for the artists and intellectuals as well. And the things are inevitably going to get worse before getting any better, and as thousands upon thousands of highly educated and creative people would not be able to find gainful employment and personal fulfillment, they will be forced by their individual collective misery to start questioning, looking for and demanding explanation, thus ushering in the new era of analytical thoughts. But there is also another possibility of a much more sinister nature, since the educated and creative people rarely, and justifiably so, blame themselves for their societal marginality and resulting from it personal misery. They tend to look for the wrongs in the system which has caused it. Consequently, they are the ones who create revolutionary theory. They bring forth Marx and Lenin's, Mussolini's and Hitler's, who provide the masses with the necessary spiritual reason in ideological form of their material discontent. And this leads to revolutions. Thus, a society incapable of employing its best educated and creative minority is scorching and disaster.